Uh, I'm here to refute the main claim that inapplicable sex education leads to negative consequences among youth. So, their first secondary claim was that sexual education programs are often inaccurate. Their second was that the current method of sexual education is not preventing negative consequences over our youth. And the third secondary claim was abstinence-only sexual education fails to prevent STDs and unplanned pregnancies. To point out their first secondary point, they had mentioned that she had mentioned a quote from April DaCosta, who had mentioned a statistics from the National Conference of State Legislatures that in 2014, 22 states required sexual education in public schools. And of these 22 states, only 3 of them had to be factually accurate. Well, I found the same location, the National Conference of State Legislatures, had an updated list for that. As of March 1st, 2016, it had become 24 states that required sexual education, and that 20 of those 24 states mandated that it be medically accurate. It also mentioned that 33 states mandate that in public schools that it is necessary to have a HIV and STD related course to be offered. To move on to their second point, the current method of sexual education is not preventing negative consequences amongst youth. She really didn't go into anything that really mentioned all of this. I didn't see much there. So she doesn't necessarily mention what the current method is. Through the research, I found that between 2007 and 2014, the teen pregnancies have gone down by 42%. And this is according to pewresearch.org. During this time, in 2011, there was something written called the National Sexuality Education Standards, which was created by a joint operation between the American Association of Health Education, American School Health Association, National Education Association Health Information Network, and the Society of State Leaders of Health and Physical Education. All of these nonprofit organizations work together to create a national standard of sexual education that is to be not used as implemented, but as a reference for what should be taught during sexual education courses in public schools. And to move on to our third point, that abstinence-only sexual education fails to prevent STDs and unplanned pregnancies. Of all 50 states in the United States, it is not stated how many teach abstinence-only sexual education, but it does mention that 22 states plus the District of Columbia have refused federal funding for teaching abstinence-only education. States such as California, Colorado, Maine, and New York, and Wisconsin all actually teach medically accurate, comprehensive sexual education. And this is why I'm saying it. Yeah.
All right, structurally, you identify the main and the secondary claims pretty clearly. On the first point, you've got a definite challenge on the accuracy of the advocate's information with a claim that updated information suggests that we do have more states who are requiring this kind of education and 20 states that require medically accurate information, so that seems to challenge the information that the advocates presented very directly on that point. I thought that that was pretty effective. And you had an additional point that showed that a number of states require some kind of class on HIV, STIs, or STDs. So that seems like it's an appropriate argument to make on that particular point. I think you need to summarize the argument here and suggest that although at one time there may have been inconsistency in what the states taught or whether or not it was required to be a particular way, it certainly seems that now things have changed and that there are a lot of criteria that are being applied. On the second point, I think you've got a good piece of information here that's kind of buried and you're not getting as much out of it as you need to have, and that is that the decline in teenage pregnancy has happened that's pretty substantial, a 42% decline. Now, why did that happen? We don't know, but it probably didn't have a huge amount to do with sex education in the classrooms if they've been around that long, and especially if they're all bad, like the advocates talking about. How is it that we managed to have a reduction in the number of teen pregnancies? To me, it seems like this suggests that there are factors that affect this that are not related to education. Circumstance, economics, cultural changes. I mean, there are a whole bunch of things that might affect teenage sexual practices and pregnancies and disease and all those kinds of things. And the advocate seems to assume that it all comes down to education. And I think you've got some good information here that suggests that it may be something else. And then you've got a follow-up that says, but we still have some criteria that are being established. We have a lot of organizations that are addressing this particular issue. And I think you need to be a little bit more affirmative about what those claims mean. You give us information, but you're not telling us what inference we should be making on this and how we should use those inferences to judge what the advocate said. So you need to do a little bit more contrast on those points. I like the information that you had. I just think that you need to make stronger claims from the information that you've got and then contrast those claims to what the advocate is saying. All right, thank you.